Training video number 4, still on Saturday, the 6th of March, and we're still in the year 2021. Mark, we're going to call this one Breach of Peace. But as always, I've got into the habit now of, once we've finished a previous recording, thinking again, always from a layman's terms, is just to reiterate a couple of points that were raised before, because I know that, as we've said, every subject matter is in such great depth when it comes to people really getting to understand these simple basic rights and the knowledge that they have to give them the power to exercise the authority that we all have within ourselves. A few points that obviously are raised, I just want to keep sort of reiterating them, and it will help to just to stick into people's minds. On the last recording, number 3, obviously you talked about the Bill of Rights. And I know that obviously for those of you who aren't aware of this, every time Mark and I turn the camera off, I do say to Mark, see if you can actually condense that down into one paragraph. So before we talk about breach of peace, just to reiterate on those few points then, Mark, just give me a one paragraph on exactly what the Bill of Rights are.
A breach of peace. Basically, there was a breach of peace, and then they created a power sharing agreement between the Lords Spiritual, the Lords Temporal, and the Commons, and the new monarch that they put into place. So it's purely a power sharing agreement where royal prerogative is the creation of the source of authority, which was granted by the Lords Temporal, Lords Spiritual, and the Commons to William and Mary. And that's continued through to the current Queen Elizabeth II. And lawfully, she uses that grant of power, that legal grant of power, in the promises to create a contract to govern the people according to their respective laws and customs. And within that power sharing agreement, the Bill of Rights, it says that Her Majesty's government, or His Majesty if it's a male monarch, will enforce the will of Parliament. And therefore Parliament assembled creates the Acts of Parliament, which then Her Majesty's government enforces. So Her Majesty's government is subject to Parliament. Parliament is superior. And all of the ministers of Parliament are members of Parliament. And before they can do anything, they need to swear allegiance to the monarch or an affirmation to the monarch. And then through democracy, which is a massive illusion, that's just a divide and conquer mechanism. They first past the post system in the UK determines the party which forms the government, and the head of that party automatically becomes the Prime Minister. Now, what many people don't know is that you don't actually have to have MPs as your ministers, so you can take non-elected people into forming the government and the cabinet. So the Bill of Rights purely a power sharing agreement as to how they will share the power.
It's interesting that, Mark, because that was going to lead me into my second question. Bill of Rights being a power sharing agreement, using the word power. Let's look at power, authority, governance, because I made a note before, obviously, in the last video when I was saying about governance. Do people really understand how a monarch becomes a monarch, how they actually get to that position? Do people really understand the difference between Parliament and government? Now, obviously, you've touched on that there. It might be worth you just quickly recapping there. You know, what power does a monarch have? You know, is the monarch there to govern the people, to rule the people? Let's just give people a quick overview there on people's riding authorities.
Yeah, I mean, basically the monarch is a toothless tiger. The power sharing agreement leaves the bulk of the power is actually with the with Parliament assembled. The monarch actually doesn't even enact acts of Parliament. That's done in the either I can't remember, in the Privy Council, but basically Parliament itself enacts, and Parliament has authority over the Lords. If the Lords don't agree with something Parliament wants to do in the next, within a certain amount of time, in the next parliamentary session, they can overrule the Lords. So the bulk of the power lies with the members of Parliament, and you're given the illusion that your vote actually counts, whereas it doesn't. Your power and the people's power lies in the independent judiciary, which is there to balance the power between the people and, i.e., the governed and those governing. That's where the three branches come in. It's not there to balance the power between the executive and the legislative bodies.
Which brings us on to the other point that you and I discussed off camera, which is, with the people actually holding the power, why have we actually tolerated this nonsense for such a period of time? And why have we not actually held them accountable? As you say, is all they've done basically is just constantly quote advice, guidance, and legislation. And I know the work that you and Michael and other people have done in respect of the servings and the papers that have been made already, but it's not just your responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Everyone should be now holding the courts and the Supreme Justice to account to say, are you going to let this continue?
Well, I mean, a great example is this ruling of the unlawfulness of Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson. So I might touch on customs here, actually. Because it's customary for the people to be pretty tolerant. However, you can see where that's got us. So it's time we actually change the custom, because to me, the obvious question is, why the hell hasn't the Attorney General or the Lord Chancellor got these guys in jail yet?
It's funny, actually, Mark, how what you're saying, we also had this conversation, didn't we, is that we know that all these conversations are quite lengthy and there's so many individual subjects, a little bit like health, my speciality, sort of every time someone mentions one subject, it merges into another. It's quite ironic you just said that, because one of the notes I made from the previous video was our respective, the Queen, with her governance over our respective laws and customs. What actually are our agreed laws and customs? Now, you've just mentioned one custom. A custom is that we are a very tolerant people, but, can you expand upon that? What are the respective laws and customs? Now, I don't expect you to do that across England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Canada, etc., 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 but can you actually generalize on what are already pre-agreed laws and customs?
The best way to do it is probably explaining it in very, very simple terms.
Please.
We born into the customs of our families, and our families' laws that they teach us are based upon the customs of their communities and the bigger picture. However, just going back to what I was saying about law is what gives us the most consistent results with the same cause. As our observations and experience change, we start to challenge the customs. So, for instance, if you've got siblings, we're all familiar with the two kids fighting over something. And so as they grow up, they establish the laws between themselves as to who's allowed to play with what toy. And when the kids can't sort it out between themselves, then the custom's to run to mommy or to daddy. So as we grow older, then we also start having problems with mummy and daddy's customs. And so we try and argue our truths from our observations and experience. And ultimately, the laws laid down that, well, if you don't like it, leave it, leave here. And then you'll move on to setting up and creating your own laws and customs.
And I suppose a way of simplifying this goes back to our original conversations of talking about divine law, natural law, universal law. Cause no harm to another, be kind, courteous, respectful. And I don't really like to use the word civil, because if we start using civil, I could start another conversation off there. But I think that's a sensible point, Mark, isn't it? Is that we are all, for one, I think the word is respect, isn't it? Respect one another, love one another, be kind and courteous to one another. And at the end of the day, I think that is probably the most simplistic law and custom, isn't it? We are all lawfully obliged to have to live the customary way of being helpful to one another, supportive to one another. Absolutely. and not to cause any harm. So I suppose in a strange way I've answered my own question, which moves us on to the question of the subject.
Quickly to expand on that, equity acts in person and will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. Fundamentally, that's your common law maxim, do no harm, and all of that. And a breach of peace is when laws or customs conflict. The reason we get together in society is to try and control the disputes between men, so that we're not fighting one another, and get away from the ravages of nature, which gives us and creates that duty of care we owe to one another, and whereby we are obliged to uphold the peace, and we have the right of enforcement of the peace for breaches of the peace.
And that brings us nicely onto, again, with the overlap of the subject matter of the breach of peace. Going back to what we were saying before, is that this is about us actually going back to them and saying, you are making a claim against us by saying that we should be doing and following your orders based on guidance, etc. So we're taking that back to you. And the point that we're making there is the breach of peace.
They're breaching your peace.
Indeed. And let's actually use the police as an example of this. So let's use that video of where I obviously approached the police officer and said, can I intervene? Can I question? Can I assist? The first thing that I said, and I would say going into the future now, and I think it's the rule of three again, Mark, isn't it? Is that if you are to approach a police officer, is hello, this is my name, can I ask your name? They're not going to give that probably, and therefore you should ask them that 3 times. Once you've asked them their name 3 times, then on the 4th thing that you should be saying to them is, well, then you are, I assume then, that you are here acting under oath. The concern there would be if a police officer is actually there under oath. If you ask them if they're here under oath, they're probably not going to answer that either, are they? Because I think that their major concern is the fact that the way that they are currently operating, they're actually concerned themselves that they are the ones creating a breach of peace.
Very good point.
And therefore,
very, very good point.
Your question to them is, provide me with your binding precedents.
Yeah. Let me just quickly first talk about breach of peace, okay? And when anybody can lawfully interfere. And basically the binding precedents for this is the Commissioner of Police of the Metropolis versus Razi from the Court of Appeal in 2008. And it's very, very simple, actually, when you think about it, and very reasonable. So the requirements to lawfully interfere or breach somebody's peace is has anybody been harmed? Now, a lot of people are familiar and come up with the thing, you know, show me the harmed party. So if there is no harmed party, then the next test for reasonableness. Now, the binding precedent says at the time, you must have reasonable grounds to believe. So we've already excluded a harmed party. Therefore, the next step is somebody intending to cause harm? So do I have the reasonable belief that somebody's intending to cause harm? So before a policeman comes and breaches your peace or that, they must have reasonable grounds at the time. Not collecting it by stealing your phones or making assumptions or things. They must have it at the time, because the binding precedence makes it clear that order following is not lawful. It's not lawful excuse. It will not be accepted in the courts. So going back to the introduction of the three names and that, let's just look at that now in the context of these reasonable grounds. You approach me, you're a policeman. I ask you, what's your name? It's human. We normally introduce one another by name. So if you don't give me your name, you've now given me reasonable belief, okay, that there's something not right with this interaction. If you knew you were here lawfully, you'd give me your name. What's the problem? By the second time asking you, what's your name, what I'm doing there is reinforcing again. And on the second time, I will turn around to a policeman and say, you're not identifying yourself as human. What business, you know, why are you here? And then if they still refuse to give their name a third time, basically now I have reasonable grounds to believe that you as a policeman are under the belief that your orders are unlawful. Okay, now that changes the ball game totally. Because now you are intending to cause me harm. So basically a policeman comes up, or a council person comes up, anybody comes up, you ask them your name. That's the way we interact. If I just met you and didn't know you in the street, you know, oh, hi Glenn, hi, I'm Mark. You know, and you'd react, hi, I'm Glenn. And this goes to this facade of authority, false authority, uniforms and, you know, PC and all of this stuff. So the questions are perfectly reasonable. We're all equal under the law. Nobody's above the law. Therefore, why are you afraid to give me your name? Mm. And equally, when the people ask us for our names, why are we scared?
Well, as you say, the enforcement officer is hiding behind the uniform, and as you say, his core belief is that the reason for him being there is not lawful, and he's basically afraid to admit that, isn't he?
Well, that there gives you basically going on to asking him on the oath. That's another very important step of the way after the three. Because you've already got the confirmation they're not identifying as human. Therefore, you've got very good grounds to believe, after asking them 3 times for their names, that they are coming with unlawful intentions. By asking them if they're acting under the oath, you're getting confirmation that their intent they know that very likely what they've been asked to do is unlawful. And so you're gathering your evidence by asking these questions. And then you simply turn around to them. Okay, you claiming authority under an act of parliament? Okay, bring me the binding precedents. They're not going to like that at all, because they haven't even heard of what's a binding precedent. The binding precedent is the law. That's the law of the land, the common law.
Yep.
And so, firstly, they won't know what that is. And then when they don't tell you their name and they don't confirm they're acting under their oath, then you taking the authority and saying, listen, you've not only given me reason to believe that, you know, your intentions are unlawful, you further, by not confirming you're acting under your oath, give me reason to believe you yourself know that your intentions are unlawful. And therefore, I refer you to the binding precedents of the Commissioner of Police of the Metropolis versus Razi, 2008. I suggest you go and read it, because following orders is not lawful excuse. That's the law. And should you continue interfering with my life without lawful excuse, you're breaching my peace, and I will sue you for harassment. You actually can do that after the second time, that if they refuse to give you their name.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful tool that we have. And going back to the question earlier about, you know, the customs, we just need to change our customs to do that, what I've just described. The rules of law is there. They're excellent. We've got excellent laws in place. It's just our customs that need to change.
Do you know, Mark,
people,
we started this conversation by using the word power, didn't we? And there's
an example of who holds the power.
Well, this is exactly what I was about to say to you, is that the one thing that I hope that our viewers achieve from watching all of these videos is that we've used the word power quite a lot here: power, governance, monarchs, police forces, etc. When people actually really understand who holds the most power, it's not the monarch, the government, or the police. It's you. You, as a human being, actually holds all the power. And this is the time now for us to stand up and say, right, we hold the power. We are the ones that's acting lawfully. And we now expect that law to actually be put into place. And we do not accept this anymore.
The laws in place.
Sorry.
We've got to just.
It needs to be applied, is what I was saying.
Apply it. We've got to change our customs.
The law needs to be applied. Mark, I'm always going to let you finish off on a final note, but I think that's enough for today. Okay. And I think that people, obviously, as they're starting to listen to these videos and apply, I mean, I've made a comment here. When we upload these videos, we will put a comment underneath each video in the first part of the comment box, which will relate to the sections within the notice paperwork.
Absolutely, everything that we're doing is in that notice. Yeah, you know, we're telling them.
If people now actually go to the links that we've already provided, and if they look at the PowerPoint presentations, if they read through the paperwork, hopefully if they can get a print out of the paperwork, and then all the conversations we're having, we'll make a comment under them to link them in.
It's an apply it. Yeah.
And we should have a team of proper lawyers out and about there soon, Mark, shouldn't we?
Well, again, like I say, I mean, at the moment, what's important is actually to empower the people, show them, you know, what they can do if they choose to change their customs. And we will be taking people to court. I have no doubt of that, because we'll always get the arrogant people that think they're above the law. And we'll always get the abusive people. But again, if we put that into context, those are extremists. You'll always have extremists. They are not your average person. They're not your normal person. 99.9% of the people. The police have no idea how this works themselves. Yeah. So they're just as ignorant of the rule of law as we are. It's about educating us and everybody, really.
Hopefully that's about to change. It's now time for us to go and teach the police their job, I think, isn't it?
I think they know their job, but the main problem is that they fear the unknown. If they
Well,
don't,
I'll reiterate that then. Let's go and show the police that we actually know our job now then, which is to stand up for our rights and to say that we don't accept this anymore. Mark, thanks ever so much for your time today.
Okay.
And just to again let the viewers know, tomorrow, Sunday, there's two things. Tomorrow, Mark and I are going to record videos on a slightly different approach to approaching a police station, a school, and hospital, a supermarket. We're going to do some short videos tomorrow on how to, and then we're going to do this this live training session on Zoom.
Now, I think one video though that we do need to do is people need to understand what is the common law.
Yes,
because that's a massively. Every time people say, "Oh, the common law, the common law, the common law," and you simply ask them, "What do you mean by the common law?" and they're just stunned, as if I should know.
Yeah.
And you know, and by putting them on the spot, you can see they don't know either. So I really think it's worth doing one on what is the common law, how does it work, and how do we get it enforced in the courts. And that'll tie it back nicely to the question about who really holds the power, the monarch and the parliament and the government, or the people.
We know the answer. It's the people, indeed.
And that's exactly the way that it is.
Mark, thank you for today. And I'm going to close this recording down, and then we'll have a quick chin wag before we retire for the evening. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, great. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.